Former Texas Education Agency Commissioner and Texas Railroad Commissioner Michael Williams, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. So as you know, the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down using race for college admissions, calling it unconstitutional. What's your reaction?
Well, it's odd for me because I made that same decision 30 plus years ago when I was the Assistant Secretary of Education and Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education. And I believe that then, as I do now, that race should not be used in admissions and financial aid decisions on university campuses.
And why did you believe that then?
Well, I think the 14th Amendment is fairly clear that we should not use race to heap on burdens on some people and benefits to other people based upon their bloodlines. I believe that then. I believe that today.
And so when you heard and read the opinions, what was going through your mind?
As a lawyer, I read it as, okay, now I'm trying to understand what the court is saying, but as a human being who's been through this issue, and I need to tell you that when I made my decision in December of 1990, I was on the front page of every newspaper in America, above the fold. And I used to joke with President George H.W. Bush, the father, that he started the Persian Gulf War to get me off the front page of every newspaper in America. So when I read it with some sense of relief. I was right. Maybe I was 30 years too early, but I was right. And it's a long opinion. I mean, 230 some odd pages. You didn't need 230 pages to say what they needed to say. But it is a big issue in America. But what I hope that people get from it is where we go next, because that's more important than what this opinion says itself.
And before we get to that, because I do want to hear your opinion of that, why do you think it took this long from when you made your announcement to today?
Well, I think it took that long because you had to get a new composition of the court. And you had to get a firm conservative composition of the court. And so that's just about getting the right number of votes to make it happen. It wasn't about the legal authority. It was about, you got at least 5, but today's court had 6, with 6 votes to do it.
And what was the impact of your decision back then? What happened?
Well, in 1990, what it did was create a bunch of drama. And I made my decision in December. The president had vetoed the Civil Rights Act of 1990 in September. So the civil rights community thought this was the second shoe dropping, and they weren't connected. I did not talk to the White House before I made my decision. And I can remember that back when I made my decision, and many of the early questions were, what did the president know and when did he know it? The president didn't know anything, because I didn't share my opinion and what I was going to issue with the White House. Perhaps I should have, but I didn't. I was 36 years old. I just didn't share. So the impact was, it splashed a new light on affirmative action but it didn't change a whole lot at the time. What it did was put people on notice that this issue was going to be in the forefront of conversation regarding higher education going forward. And you may remember that I held the seat that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas held a couple of years before me. He held that seat under President Reagan. I held it under President George H.W. Bush.
And did you have conversations with him about what your policy statement was?
Of course, I mean, Justice Thomas and I would speak all the time. We'd spend Friday nights playing Midwest and drinking Long Island iced teas. I mean, yeah, I talk to Justice Thomas all the time.
And so I did want to read you some of the reaction from some of the Supreme Court justices who dissented. Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote that this decision rolls back decades of precedent and momentous progress. And Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson called this, quote, truly a tragedy for us all. She wrote, with let them eat cake obliviousness, today the majority pulls the ripcord and announces color blindness for all by legal fiat, but deeming race irrelevant in law does not make it so in life. How do you react to that?
Let's go to the first one with Justice Sotomayor. The reality, it does reverse precedent, because the Bakke decision in 1978 said you could use race as a factor in order to remedy the present effects of past discrimination or to advance diversity. So it does reverse that. But in 2003, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor said, this cannot last forever. And at some point in time, and she said, maybe within the next 25 years, we will stop and need to stop the use of race in higher education. So everybody knew this was coming. Everybody knew this was coming. But Justice Sotomayor is right. It did erase precedent. I'm gonna take a little issue with Justice
Brown Jackson. Yeah.
And the reason I'm gonna take issue with her is because of something I mentioned earlier. Now this puts us in the place where we needed to have always been in the last 30 some odd years. Let's just make sure that brown and Black kids, that we do a prenatal to high school education training with them, such that they are ready to go to college, they're ready for post-secondary experience, and that they have the interest to do so. Because affirmative action didn't add kids to be able to go to college. We just moved kids around. We moved them from one school to another school. We moved them from a mid-range school in our state systems to our flagships. We moved them from a mid-range school in our state system to a private elite school. But we didn't add kids who were capable to be competitive in school. Now we've got to make sure, and I say this sadly as a former state education commissioner, we've got to do a better job of making sure that we add more kids who have the interest and the ability to compete at the collegiate level. Affirmative action didn't do anything that add. It just moved kids around.
And So going forward, because before you said it's important now to focus on where things go in the future. So you just, to your point that you just made, what should colleges and universities be considering when, they want to have a diverse campus? How do they go about to achieve that?
I think there are at least two lanes that we're going to be in. Colleges and universities. I just had dinner with the president of my alma mater, University of Southern California, a couple of weeks ago. Colleges and universities are going to use proxies for race. So they're going to look at kids' economic background, whether it's a first generation student. They're going to look at certain zip codes that have been underperforming. They're going to figure out other ways other than race, because the Constitution doesn't say jack about zip codes, doesn't say anything about economic income, doesn't say anything about these other issues. And so they're going to use other proxies to figure out how to get a diverse classroom.
And you're okay with that?
But pardon me?
And you're okay with that?
I'm fine. Constitution doesn't say anything about zip codes. What I'm more interested in is what we do at the learning level for these youngsters. And at the learning level of these youngsters, we've got to do a much, much better job of learning how to teach a classroom that's browner, blacker, and poorer than classrooms that most of us were in when we were youngsters. And that's a new instructional model than we've had in the past. And that will be the saving grace for us as a country.
And
so
I wanted to ask you on that point, on that very point that you make. So now the emphasis really needs to be on elementary school, secondary school, high school, to get them ready, for college.
Let me even go before your elementary. It's going to be on prenatal. We need to be helping moms learn how to help their kids learn when mom is pregnant. Why are we waiting till the kid is 5 years old? The data tells us that there's an enormous amount of learning that youngster needs to get by the time that youngster's 3. So let's start when mom gets pregnant. Let's begin teaching moms and dads how to help their kid learn before that kid goes to institutional school. But yes, you're right. We've got to do a better job that's why I said at the beginning, from prenatal to high school.
I wanted to ask your response. Justice Thomas said today, he said that the decision, quote, sees the university's admissions policies for what they are: rudderless, race-based preferences designed to ensure a particular racial mix in their entering classes. And Chief Justice Roberts said, for too long, universities have concluded wrongly that the touchstone of an individual's identity is not challenges bested, skills built, or lessons learned, but the color of their skin. Our constitutional history does not tolerate that choice. So, given that, and going back, that aligns with your views going back 30 years ago. Do you feel a sense of vindication?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. As I think I said to you earlier, I spoke with my chief deputy, the person who was my chief deputy at the time, back there in 1990. And we, in some odd way, celebrate today's decision. We were right then. We were wrong on the politics. We were right on the law. And now America can get to its real work. And America's real work is getting young people prepared to get the learning that they need and achieve the merits that they can. But we were right there.
Michael Williams, former Texas Education Commissioner and Railroad Commissioner. We really appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jack.